that the leases, you know, every time there's a lease on federal lands, offshore, onshore, that's your money coming in. That's money coming in to support the schools and support the budgets. The state share on the money in the first 3 miles offshore. The state share on oil revenues. That's why New Mexico has huge amounts in their permanent funds, $15 billion in permanent funds. We gain a lot in New Mexico from oil and gas. In the 1980s, oil and gas paid 1/2 of the state budget, just the revenue coming in. And one of the things that's happening is that they're leasing at such a pace that there's 68 million acres that have been leased that have not been utilized. And so we passed a bill through the House. Once again, it's having a heck of a time over in the Senate. Use it or lose it. We said to the oil companies, you know, we've leased this. We don't want you just hoarding these things. Use it or lose it. And that's an approach that I think makes a lot of sense. Rather than just taking the attitude that we should just indiscriminately lease. You use it or lose it. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to know what your feelings are about NAFTA, and if they're going to reorganize.
About NAFTA or CAFTA?
NAFTA.
Well, I wasn't in Congress for NAFTA, but I've been in Congress for a number of trade agreements, and let me describe my approach. First of all, I voted against CAFTA. I voted against a number of the other trade agreements, and the criterion principle that I apply to trade agreements is very, very simple. First of all, are we trading with countries where you have human rights violations, child labor, and things like that? Most consumers that I talk to, they don't want to be dealing with products like that. They don't want to be buying products. And so we should be insisting that these human rights, child labor kind of situations are in a trade agreement so that we don't get ourselves into the situation where we're encouraging that in the trade agreement. Number 2, labor standards. What we're talking about there is these big companies around the world, the very largest ones, they're racing to the bottom to get the lowest wages. They're racing out, they race down to Mexico, then they race over to China to get the very, very lowest wages. I would like to see us start seeing humane working conditions in these places that we're trading with and helping bring along the wages and income of those people. And we can build that into our trade agreements, and I'd like to see that. And then finally, the last thing we want to see is companies going over, and our companies going over and their companies polluting places and killing people. You know, it is every couple of weeks you read in the paper about where a big company went in and did something, and thousands of people are being harmed by the pollution. Well, we should put those environmental standards in our trade agreements. And almost all of the trade agreements that have been coming forward don't have tough standards in them on those things. And so I've said, you know, until we get them in there, until we know they're enforceable, until we have a trade organization that's going to make sure they're enforceable and that the countries are doing that they're not just paying lip service to the idea of these things, then we shouldn't be engaging in this. And the unfortunate thing is we kind of gave away the ranch to the big guys. That's what I didn't vote for it, but I'll tell you that's what I think Congress did. Is the very biggest companies wanted this to go on, and so they signed off on it. And now Congress, as the power of the person, the power of legislating, we have to just vote up or down on trade agreements. We can't even go to the negotiations and figure out what we want in there. We passed this fast track legislation. So we need to bring trade agreements into the 21st century with our values, the things that we care about. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I was wondering what your feelings are